Later on this afternoon, I am going to do a camera test with a band who are recording a music video. And the reason we're doing a test, well, you know, always do a test if you can, because then you get to see how the things that you're going to be doing will work. But in particular, for this one, doing the camera test because I am going to modify this Blackmagic Pocket 4K to shoot infrared. I have actually in the past shot a fair amount of infrared with an old, goodness, I forget what it was like a Canon A380 or something, and that camera was incredibly limited. The reason I was using it at the time, like going back 12 years, maybe more, was because it was relatively inexpensive to buy modified, but it didn't really do good video or anything like that, so I actually used it to shoot stills and did time lapses with it, as well as a couple of still photos, which maybe I'm pinging up now. It's a very interesting, cool look. Of course, in recent years, it's been popularized in Dune, for example, the whole Dune 2 on Getty Prime, the fight with Feyre in the arena, that's all shot infrared, the implication being that, you know, the light from their star is actually different, so it would feel different on the planet. And you can see that the skin kind of goes all milky, eyes render differently, clothes and all kinds of materials are going to render in a different way. Now, that's treating it infrared to black and white, but within this, there's all kinds of questions about how you actually section off the bit of spectrum that you want to shoot, and then whether you are taking it straight to black and white, or if you're going to actually try and get something else out of it, which you can do color and various channel inversions and swaps, and that will give you a very, very different look. Another film where it was used to great effect was Nope, and in that they were using a rig with a prism or some kind of splitter, beam splitter, that's the word I'm looking for, so that you had a normal camera shooting normal color imagery, and then you had the same image exactly lined up going to a camera that was modified to shoot infrared. The idea being that you can get a very good day for night effect, because the sky can be rendered properly to be black and dark and have that kind of otherworldly nighttime look that they managed to get from it. So yeah, different application, very, very unique application, but still it was using an infrared modified camera. So the band want to do something like this. We looked at a ton of music videos, and I think that the ones that stood out for me are like the old Woodkid music videos, which were high contrast black and white, and then also references to the lighthouse and things. So I like the idea of doing something which has that grittier black and white aesthetic, and maybe rather than just going with filming it black and white, we actually modify to infrared and then try and do that just to make it stand out, and we'll see how it goes. This is why we're doing the camera test. To modify this, got to do a couple of things. There are a couple of guides on YouTube as to how to do this, so this is my one. It's pretty straightforward. You don't need to worry too much generally about damaging things. It's not like you're going to have to do tons of internal mods. Basically, you are just removing a little bit of glass, which sits in front of the sensor, behind a little block which keeps it in place. And that little bit of glass is the IR cut filter. And once that's removed, you are going to get a full spectrum out of that sensor. Basically, every camera sensor made is a full spectrum sensor, and then you have filtration in front of it. I'm massively oversimplifying a very complex subject, but suffice it to say, once it's in that... sorry, I'll line this up so I can carry on talking. Once it's in that mode of not having any filtration in front, you are going to find that actually it probably doesn't look great, because everything will go incredibly infrared. Also, obviously, goes without saying, the light that you're filming with will still have an effect. So visible light versus infrared light, an LED light, for example, I'm being lit by LEDs at the moment, they have comparatively got less infrared than another light source like tungsten, because tungsten lights, well, don't need me to tell you, they burn hot. So they are emitting lots and lots of infrared light as well as the visible light, whereas an LED does not emit nearly as much infrared unless it's been modified. It opens up all kinds of questions. On a bright sunny day, you're going to get a higher proportion of visible light to infrared versus on a cloudy day, you're probably going to get more infrared to less visible light. So yeah, these make it very difficult to do this. I can't just spin it because they grip. That's really frustrating, but I thought I'd better do it because otherwise people in the comments will go, oh my god, he's touching the sensor and stuff. Now as I'm doing this, I'm holding down the mount just here because otherwise this is going to spring up and you may lose a little spring in there. So at a certain point, it will just all give. So what we're going to do is just put a little lens cap there to store those in. Place that down, and then I'm going to remove this front section here. Push that down. I'm just going to place that off to the side. It doesn't particularly matter, but helps if you remember what orientation everything is in. Underneath that, we've got this little kind of shim just here. And again, if I just release that gently so it doesn't spring up, I can remove this shim. Try to remember which direction it's going to go in. That's just there. And then underneath here, we've got 2 screws, one there and one there, and then another 2 screws in the actual lens communication part of the mount just there. Now, all of this can be done with a small little Phillips type head, and I'm just going to start by removing these ones. This, again, very straightforward. If you can wire a plug, you can probably do this mod. The only part that's a little bit scary is the fact that you are messing with your camera. It's probably quite expensive, and there's a risk of damaging the sensor. But if you do everything sensibly, then there shouldn't be any risk. What I'm going to do is just pop this part out, and again, place it off to the side. Make sure you don't drop it into there. Scratch the glass. Now, I'm going to undo this one as well, but some of the mods I've seen, they kind of lift this all the way out. I found that you don't actually have to do that. It's probably better if you do, but there's all kinds of ribbon cables attached, and I kind of didn't fancy yanking it out and damaging a ribbon cable because they can be quite sensitive. Put those on that side so I know which ones go where. Okay, there we go. Now, you can just lift this a little bit, loosen it off. Again, just being careful not to damage anything. And then very gently, I'm just going to go in and give this a little lift. And hopefully, I'll just be able to take it out. And that is it. That is the infrared cut. You can see, actually, it's kind of blue, and it makes me kind of blue. And basically that's what it's doing. It is correcting, it's like a CTB almost. It's more specific than that, it's more scientific than that. It is filtering out certain wavelengths, but without that blue correction, what we see is going to be really, really red. So I'm going to place that off to the side just here. Next part of the mod would involve getting a piece of glass, which is just see-through, clear. And there are specific dimensions to this, which I will flash up on the screen now. I've actually found that through Googling around, getting a watch crystal sapphire screen that is flat, some are convex, some are curved, and that is not what you want. So you need a flat piece of glass, and again, those measurements I will be flashing up on screen. That can then be dropped in instead of this filter. Now, in an ideal world, what we would do is buy another one of these, heat it up, take out the glass in the center, then glue this glass back into there. You could potentially just drop that in, but the risk is that it's not going to sit quite in the right place and it might actually butt up against the sensor. Now the reason that we need this piece of glass is for focus. So when you're focusing, the lens mount has been positioned and it expects to be positioned at a distance which is going to allow the back focus of the lens to hit the sensor plane and be in focus at infinity. But without this piece of glass, it's not traveling through that medium and the focus is going to be off, which will mean, summarizing, that it is sometimes, not always, depends on the lens, impossible to get to infinity focus. Today, I'm not particularly worried about infinity focus, and also I'm going to be flipping this back later on tonight to do something tomorrow. So yeah, less things for me to mess around with. But if you need infinity focus, you're going to need to put that little bit of glass back in order to get it. So now I can go back to reassembling everything, and it's all the same but in reverse. So just going to get this little screw. And when you're doing this, what you really want to avoid, obviously, is dropping anything on that sensor now, because where normally your sensor is not exposed, probably didn't know this, your sensor is obviously sitting behind that bit of glass, and that means that you can't really damage the sensor. So when you're cleaning it, you're not cleaning the sensor, you're cleaning the glass in front of the sensor, but now it is all exposed, and anything you do is a lot worse. You really don't want to scratch your sensor up or drop a screw on it or something. So that's all in. I'm going to take this and carefully place it back into position. In there. Grab the next screw. Carefully position him in there. Okay. Upshot of all of this is those infrared cut filters are a replaceable part. So when you're cleaning your sensor, obviously still go careful and stuff, but in the normal run of things, you could replace that. Just like we've done now, you can buy them as a replacement part. So you don't have to worry as much as perhaps you felt like about that. Now next, the shim goes on top just here. There we go. Just got to sit that in there, and that's not going to sit until this is pushed down. But that will do for now. Take your mount, place it on top, line everything up, line up that little pin, and then holding that in place. There we are. Just going to take these screws. Oh, these ones aren't magnetic. Forgot that. And of course, that's the Allen key. In fact, you know what? This could go horribly wrong. Yeah. Titch of the glove now. That one's in. One's in. Now the last part of the equation here, as I alluded to earlier, is filtration. So without that IR cut filter, your full spectrum sensor is going to pick up everything. So what you can do is actually replace the IR cut filter inside the camera with a specific IR cut filter that is giving you a very narrow select wavelength, and those different wavelengths are going to have different looks. There's all kinds of websites where you can go and like check out the different nanometer filtration for infrared light, but the downside of doing it that way is that once you've installed it, you have to go through all of this to change it to a different look. But if you choose, like I have just here, to keep it as a completely open sensor, you can actually put filtration on front of the lens. And when you put the filtration on the front of the lens, it's going to mean that you can actually get a different look by just switching out that filter. So I'll show you in a moment. I've actually got the one which I think is going to work best for what I'm doing. And you can buy a whole set of them and just switch them out. Now, certain wavelengths of filter are going to be more geared towards doing pure black and white. Some will give you funky effects on foliage, like turning grass and leaves and things green, yellow. But it really does depend on the look that you're after, and everyone's going to have a preference. So I find that by far and away the best thing to do is give yourself the options and then be able to filter afterwards. Okay, that is all done. I'm going to take a quick look at the sensor there. Seems pretty clean. And now we're going to place our lens on. Yeah, you can see a little bit of a red haze to everything, even though I'm on the LED light. And as you can imagine, that's only going to get more and more extreme as we go outside and we actually start to film under light which has a decent portion of infrared. Now, infrared filtration. I bought this on Amazon. I haven't really had loads of time to test it out yet, so I'm not saying this is the best one to get, but it was inexpensive and it was available quickly. It's from Mad Cameras. This is an IR720, so that's 720 nanometer filtration on this. You're going to notice straight away that is cutting out a lot of light, and that's the idea. It is like an ND filter, but what you're going to find is when normal ND filters, you would normally want a proportionate amount of infrared filtration in your ND filter, because as you cut out more visible light, you need to cut out more infrared light. This one isn't doing that, and it's tuned to 720 nanometers. So in this room, it does kind of basically look black. Once we put this onto here and go outside, we are going to see the full effect of that 720 nanometer filtration. And hopefully at this point, I'm going to cut into some of the tests that we do from the shoot, and hopefully they look awesome. You will also be able to imagine, without me having to tell you, that you're going to need a lot of light to be able to shoot with this. So it does either mean you're bringing tons of light, or you are shooting in the daytime, or with a very, very sensitive camera. I'm going to see how this works out in broad daylight today. I'm going to see how it works out in shade, in sort of wooded areas where the light level is going to be far, far lower. If you are lighting for infrared, you are either going to have to use infrared modified light fixtures, like the LEDs that I talked about, security lights, but they're probably putting out a relatively low level. Or you're going to have to use tungsten lighting or HMI light, which actually does have a good proportion of infrared in it, but it means it's more of an effort to do. You can't just use tiny little LED lights like this, because they're just not going to be putting out enough infrared for you to get the full effect. That is how you modify your Pocket 4K to shoot infrared. Really simple. I was shocked how easy it was. Don't blame me if you scratch your sensor.